Would you like to know what Michael Pachter thinks of Xbox One Scorpio launch games and 4K display support? If so, stay tuned for more. Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Mats and you're watching the Mats Gaming News channel. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, so check the links in the description of this video below. And also don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell button to stay up to date with the latest news. In the latest episode of Pachter, Wedbush securities analyst Michael Pachter, while answering a question regarding whether he saw Sony upgrading its hardware to compete with the Scorpio, said that he does not see Sony doing such thing and that Xbox One Scorpio will go by the same rules as PlayStation 4 Pro. And as always, I do agree with some of his statements and I don't agree with others, so let's get to it. Now, I really do believe that some of the rules that did apply to PlayStation 4 Pro will also do apply to Xbox Scorpio, because the fact of the matter is that both consoles are PlayStation 4 and Xbox One upgrades. Now, obviously Xbox One Scorpio is going to be a bigger of an upgrade over Xbox One than PlayStation 4 Pro over PlayStation, but still it's not new generation per se. Both consoles are still going to be held to some degree by the previous generation of console, by the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So, to some degree the same rules will apply. Both will be backwards compatible. Both consoles uses the same, networking services, the very same accessories, controllers, etc., right? Obviously there are new stuff coming with both consoles, but we will get into that in a minute. Then he also went to say that every game on PlayStation 4 Pro has to be backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. Likewise, Xbox One Scorpio games will have to be backwards compatible with Xbox One. Which, as I said, that's the case, and this is what those two consoles, both Pro and Scorpio, are sort of similar, and both will be held back a little bit by the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, at least for a while, until both companies will not phase out the older consoles, and that will happen sooner or later. Then he said that not many games will support Scorpio at launch. Now, I do not agree with him, and not too many games is obviously a matter of perception, because how many games you would consider many or not many? I mean, PlayStation 4 Pro at launch got around 30 games that were sort of patched for PlayStation 4 Pro. I mean, obviously the patches varied, right? Some got a better frame rate, some other got just high resolutions, but they did support PlayStation 4 Pro at one way or the other. And I do believe that Scorpio will not have less though than this number of games. Maybe, I mean, it will be pretty much close to it. And now, because let's face it, there's going to be few first-party games that will be patched. Games, probably the biggest franchises, games like Halo 5, maybe Gears of War 4 and Forza Horizon are given, because even a year ago Microsoft did confirm that those games that have been released like within last year are already shaping up to be supported on Scorpio with a 4K resolution and that kind of stuff, right? So Gears of War and Forza Horizon 3 will have an Xbox Scorpio versions running probably in 4K. Not entirely sure about 16 frames per second, I don't think so, but 4K resolution is pretty certain. On top of that, we will see Crackdown 3, State of Decay, Sea of Thieves, and all other games in development now taking advantage of Scorpio's power via the Windows Universal platforms. I mean, games on this platform, on Windows Universal platform, will scale up to 4K without any issues. This is the very interesting thing about Windows Universal Platform, that you actually create one version of the game and it's really easy to actually make any changes to resolution, assets and that kind of stuff, and partially that's being done automatically. So you sort of allow the Windows Universal Platform to make some changes for you apparently as well. So I mean, I'm not really a developer really, so I don't really want to talk too much about it, but so I've heard. Then Michael also believes that the games on Scorpio may not run at 4K, at least at launch, but nevertheless those games will look sharper on 4K displays. Now that's not true, and I totally not agree with him. And here's why. It's actually much easier to implement native 4K resolution on Scorpio or any other console or PC than checkerboard rendering on Pro or sparse rendering on Scorpio, as Microsoft calls it, right? Because the thing of the matter is that checkerboard rendering is a different way of rendering graphics. So you need to make a lot of game code changes to actually make this happen. With 4K resolution, that's not the case. You basically just scale up the game to 4K. So that's just a matter of basically setting some settings in the game engine and you're pretty much done. Obviously, I'm really oversimplifying things right now, but it's really easy to actually bump up the resolution. Obviously, you still need to consider the performance and stuff, so you need to test how that works on the system and stuff, but the changing the resolution is super easy. So as I said, I don't really agree with Pachter on this at all. I'm sure we will see quite a few games patched for Scorpio and many running in native 4K at launch, and even more next year. I mean, obviously not every single game will be running in 4K, and not every single game that was already published will support Scorpio, just like with some games on PlayStation 4 Pro, but I'm sure there's going to be more than enough games that will support Scorpio, you know, in one way or the other. Now, another thing to consider here is the fact that PlayStation 4 Pro is already running, you know, many games in 4K, right? I mean, right now I think there's around 20 games confirmed for PlayStation 4 Pro and already running on PlayStation 4 Pro in 4K. So I don't really understand where this narrative comes from that Scorpio will not be running games in 4K. Obviously it will be running 4K because it's going to be much more powerful a console than PlayStation 4 Pro, and if Pro is already running games in 4K, some games in 4K, why do you think that Scorpio will not be able to do it? I don't know, very strange logic. On top of that, we will probably have unpatched games with uncapped frame rate running with higher frame rate, and games using dynamic resolution scaling that will run in 1080p all the time, which is very good, and this is something that Microsoft have already confirmed. Also, all backwards compatible Xbox 360 titles will run better on Scorpio. That has been confirmed as well. And just to top this up, he went on to say that he believes that PlayStation 4 Pro is not a true 4K console, but a high definition and a high dynamic variant of it. Pachter also believes that PlayStation 5 will come out somewhere around 2019 and 2020, and the Xbox 2 will follow suit. What that means is that we will be getting a new console after a cycle of 3 years. So two things here. I actually have an issue with the fact that many say that, oh, this console is going to be true 4K and the other is not really a true 4K console. Now, the problem is that actually both consoles will be running games in 4K. I mean, PlayStation 4 Pro is already running games in 4K. Sure, not every single one. Most of the games will obviously still be using checkerboard rendering, but this console is 4K capable machine. It's running some of the games in native 4K. And to be honest with you, similar thing can be actually said about Scorpio. Sure, it will be running more games in 4K because it's going to come with more raw processing power, right? So it's very logical to assume that Scorpio will run even more games in 4K, but not every single one of them. So to be honest with you, we should actually stop this whole 4K narrative. A true 4K console, not true 4K console, that doesn't make any sense. That's basically the same narrative that we've heard so far for the last 3 years with Xbox One and PlayStation 4. As in PlayStation 4 Pro being believed a 1080p, a true 1080p console, whereas the Xbox One was actually considered to be not true 1080p console, just because a couple of games were actually run in 720p and many in 900p. But still, 60 or 70% of Xbox One games still run in 1080p. Does it really make it a 720p console? No. So it's same twisted logic. I mean, let's just stop it, right? Just stick to the fact that PlayStation 4 Pro is what it is, and Scorpio will just be more powerful console, right? Whether some games will run in 4K or checkerboard rendered 800p, I mean, what's the difference? You know, as long as the game looks fine, that's fine, right? But, you know, Scorpio will be just more powerful and will have just a little bit better graphics, or maybe even more. And last thing that obviously he did say, he talked about, was the whole PlayStation 5 thing and Xbox 2, as he calls it. So a console that will follow Scorpio. I mean, obviously it's actually too early to talk about those consoles because Scorpio is not even out. But for those of you that believe that Sony will release PlayStation 5 next year, don't get too excited. I don't really believe that. I do agree with Michael Pachter on this, that we will probably see PlayStation 5 somewhere around 2019 or 2020, and Xbox 2 will probably follow that. So we may see Xbox 2 around 2020 as well. So the new console life cycle that Michael Pachter talks about, being a 3 years life cycle, may be actually the case. So I really do believe that, especially with Scorpio and Microsoft talking about Scorpio as being the upgrade, and Aaron Greenberg talking about really end of console generations for the Xbox brand and Xbox consoles. So Microsoft may actually just as well just follow this constant upgrade path, right? So new console every 3 years. You know, that would actually make sense, and I don't really have a problem with that, because the good thing about it is that if you still want to stick to your old console, you can do it and you can still play all the games. But Microsoft will actually give you a choice of getting a more powerful console that will actually run the games better, right? So better frame rate, better resolution probably, or even better graphics in the future. And I do believe that Sony will have to adapt to this as well. They may came up with PlayStation 5 and they actually call it a next generation console, but believe it or not, but PlayStation 5 will be probably still based off of the x86 CPU architecture and some AMD GPU or something, and which will make it backwards compatible automatically. So even though they may call it a next gen, it will be based on the same technology, just more powerful. So it's still going to be an upgrade, right? And they will actually have the same thing with PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro probably after the next 3 years and stuff. So, you know, I can see that happening, but you know, that's just me. But anyway, I think that wraps up this video really. So thank you very much for tuning in and obviously sharing all my videos with others. I really do appreciate that. Hopefully you did enjoy this video, and if you did, you know the drill. Let me know what you think about it. Comment in the comment section below, hit the like button, subscribe, and you take care. Bye.